Hey, what's going on? My name is Joe Batesh. I'm the marketing director here at Exceed Network, and I'm sitting here today with Eli Yedid, who is the CEO of QTPie and of RBX. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about entrepreneurship, what it takes to do it right, and what it takes to start a company, and what you need to have in your toolbox, and how not to mess up.
Which is not easy. Yes, hi, I'm Eli Yedid. Very nice to host, very nice to have Joe meeting with me. I've been doing this for quite a while. I enjoy it. I love talking to young entrepreneurs and helping them on their road, especially early on the road. I'm the CEO of RBX and QTPie, both very large companies with a lot of people. And I'm also a board member at Exceed, which I head up the incubator, and I talk to all the young entrepreneurs. So glad to sit down and talk about some of the stuff that we do.
So I don't know if you got that, but a lot of entrepreneurship here. Yeah. So how did you start RBX? How did you start QTPie? What went into those things?
Wow, we're going back. Okay, so I'm definitely not as old as I look. I've been doing this quite a while. I've been doing this for about 25 years. I started every company that I have by myself with no help and no money. So to start out with nothing, which is what I think a lot of the people that I meet with and a lot of people that are probably going to see this video, it's a tough and sometimes empty feeling to sort of climb a mountain when you're really looking up at the top. So I try to bring myself to the level of the younger person as much as possible. But I would say the first thing that a young entrepreneur needs to know is that it's very hard work, and I challenge them as many times as possible to remind them that no one becomes an expert in any field. There's a minimum of a 10-year curve to become an expert in your field. So I started out as an entrepreneur.
Wait, so before we get into this, let's define entrepreneur, because I know there's a lot of nonsense surrounding that word,
right?
And what it means online and what it means to have it in your Instagram profile. So I mean, when we say entrepreneur, who are we talking about?
It's a good question. I think it's a very broad word. It's something that is used a little loosely. I think what it means is someone who has a vision. I think it's someone who has an idea, someone that has an array of skills that wants to bring that into the marketplace, whether it's a service or a good. Yeah, and of course the ultimate goal for any entrepreneur is to make a successful.
So it doesn't need to be
company.
like, we don't need to be making the next Facebook. We don't need to be making the next Amazon. We're just trying to make some money, and we have an idea, right?
I think it starts with, I have to do something, right? I'm in this world, and I see a lot of like non-educated entrepreneurs as opposed to the ones that go through the trials and tribulations of university. And I could relate to that because I wanted to go to college, but my parents couldn't afford it really, so I didn't. Yeah, okay. so I didn't go. I went later, many years later, and I got my degree at night. But I think for the uneducated or the common entrepreneur, there's a grit and there's a vision that they need. But on top of those things, you need a personality that is likable, because you're asking people to
buy into you.
To buy into you. You're really selling yourself when you're an entrepreneur. You need a certain risk level tolerance. Not everybody has that. And to become a successful entrepreneur, you are going to trip and fall. So you need to be the person that falls down 7, gets up 8 times. And that's I think one of the first things I look at when I interview or I meet a young entrepreneur.
Let's talk about the vision first.
Sure.
So what do you when you're speaking to somebody, when you're thinking about investing in a company, or when someone's really just asking for advice and they give you the vision of the company, what are you looking for to kind of refine that? If you're going to give them advice, or if you're deciding whether or not the company's going to be successful, in the vision pitch, in the elevator pitch of what the company's supposed to do, how we're going to change the world, or just how we're going to move product. What are you looking for? What's right? What's wrong? What's valid? What's invalid? Where does the nonsense play in? What's right?
Yeah, and I think it starts with what the end goal is. What are they doing? Are they coming in with a new product? Are they going to be an interrupter in the space that they want to be in? Are they really determined to do what they want to do, or is this just one step in there, many steps before they figure out what they really want to do? And I try to cut through that really early.
How do you do that?
I'm very blunt,
right.
Is what I am. I cut through. The first question I ask is, and I like to sort of get to know them by putting them in their outside of their comfort zone. Mm-hmm. The first question I ask is, what does the world need this? Like, what are you doing outside of it? I know you want to make a living. That's great. So does everyone else. But what does the world need your product for or service? Explain that to me in 30 seconds, 60 seconds. Take as much time as you want. And I think that challenges them to realize that, and some of them don't always realize this, is that that's what they need to look at more than what I need is what does the market need? If it's not about selling yourself as much as a lot of people think.
Right.
It's really selling what your idea is, and that's when people are going to come on board and sort of you could build it with other people. So that's like that's the starter.
So just adding to what you're saying, I was in the venture capital space for a little bit, and whenever we would sit in on meetings and try to see whether or not we're going to invest in a certain company, the biggest red flag we always noticed, and it was so obvious, is when a CEO or a founder was talking about the company and the vision, and the word "I" was in every single sentence.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
I want to do this. I want to do that. I'm going to do this. We're going to do that. Mm-hmm. And it's and when you're talking about a product or a service, generally it's not about you.
Yes.
It's about who's going to be giving you the money for it.
It's a great point, and not everybody has that tool that you just described. They're very egocentric, and unless you're Bill Gates or
but even if you're Bill Gates, I mean, these guys built products to change the world.
And they did slip and fall, and they did have their trials and tribulations. Yeah, I think there's like on the list of things that a great entrepreneur can have is the ability to speak into the other person. I think but it's not. I think any successful person that wants. If whatever you want to do in your life, it's you have to speak to the other person. You have to have the self-awareness to realize that it's not about you.
So I wouldn't even call it an ability. I would call it a foundation. When you're starting a company and like when we used to see people saying "I" all the time and it being about them, we realized if this company fails to succeed, it doesn't matter. All this person wants to do is make sure what they want to see happens. It comes from, like you said, an egocentric place. And that's a scary thing in business. When if you're with somebody or your partner or your investment is solely based on themselves and not other people. Yeah. That to me, like whenever anybody asks me what's the hardest thing about being an entrepreneur, what's the hardest thing about having your own business, is that it's very hard not to do it for you. It's your company. You worked very hard on it, or it's your vision. You dedicate a lot of time to it. It's very hard not to make it all about you, but it can't be, right?
I completely agree. I don't know that the world has a place for someone that doesn't have the ability to see past it. What's your risk reward out of this? Why should you come work for me and my idea? Why would the company give me money, or a bank give me money, or an investor give me money for my idea? Usually 90% of the time that person has a successful entrepreneur has that skill, because they always see the other person's point of view. Any successful person does that. So what you saw and rejected was someone who had a very self sort of.
But now, of course, there's a balance to it, right? If you have somebody who is extremely humble, has a lot of humility, and is very modest, and is almost. It could be to a deficit, They could be hurting themselves in that way too. Let's leave alone the person who's doing it for ego. Now you have the person who just does it because they think it's a really good idea, but doesn't have that. Maybe it's a charismatic personality, or maybe doesn't have the self-confidence to think that they can do it. How do you balance those two extremes to kind of figure out the perfect recipe?
Well, I know myself. I know who I am. Like we were saying, anyone that knows themselves and has the awareness, they're already one step ahead of people that don't have that. So you could have
when you say you know yourself, what do you mean?
I mean, like what you're good at, what you're not good at, what you need help with, what you don't need help with. If you're a creative, you need someone really organized to create your company together. If you have left side, right side brain, and know yourself, meaning you're comfortable in your own skin So when you get rejected, because everyone gets rejected, you just get right back up and say, okay, I know that that's, you know, a mark on or a reality of maybe one of my imperfections, but overall, I'm gonna do this for that reason. So I forgot where we were going when we were talking about this, but I think the big picture is you have to have a tool belt. You have to have some humility. You have to have self-confidence. There's you know, the 80-20 rule, 70-10, 90-10, 70-30, but I think there's no real formula, but you have to have both. You have to have the full tool belt. If you have a hammer and your only problem is a nail, you'll be fine. But if you have...
it's not the case.
It's not the case. You need a wrench, you need a screwdriver, you need a Phillips, you need a flathead. You need as a successful entrepreneur, you're going to need several tools. And if you don't have that tool, then you should know
that you don't,
and accept that
place in your tool belt.
And yeah, exactly. Building an organization and building people's trusts, it takes time. It takes a lot of time, and I think for the most part, that's part of the 10-year curve to become an expert and become a successful company. I was not greatly successful for the first 10 years of my career. As you grow in the company and as you grow in the industry, the people around you also are growing in the industry. So I think that's something that I try to tell people too, is not to skip around. If you believe in something, stay on it. I've so many times I see younger entrepreneurs with the I call them wantrepreneurs, because they really don't have a specific thing that they just keep skipping around and trying to figure out what works, and you know that's fine.
And you think that comes from wanting to start a company or having
they want to,
like what do you attribute to that?
I'm not a psychiatrist,
right?
But I think a lot of them have ADHD. That doesn't mean that they're not.
Right, of course. Something might hit.
It could hit, but sometimes the problem is when you throw too many things up against the wall, nothing's really going to stick.
Right.
As opposed to, I say this, I learned this 25 years ago and it still sticks with me today. There's, from an entrepreneur standpoint, there's the 4 Ds of action. It's the first D is do it. You have something on your desk and you have an agenda, do it. Simple. The next one is date it. So if you have a very important project and you can't get to it, then you just say, okay, I'll get to that at a further date. The third D is delegate it. A little tricky, but if you're a good delegator and you know how to manage, that's a very important, very successful method too. The fourth D is the most important D. The fourth D is dump it. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen something on my desk and I just keep saying I'll get to it, or you know, at some point that's not that important today. If you don't do it, date it, or delegate it, then you better dump it, because it's taking up brainwaves and empty.
So those are the only
space.
4 appropriate reactions to something coming up.
Well, that's, I don't know about that, but I learned that 25 years ago, and it still till today sticks with me, that I think the most important thing is dump it, and that not a lot of young entrepreneurs know how to dump it. If they're like, you know, to have 6 things going on, I want to know what's the most important to you. I want you to explain it to me. And the ones that don't make the top 3, I'm gonna really challenge you to dump them.
Now, how do we differentiate between the whole platitude of falling down 7 times, getting up 8, and the dump it rule? How do you make it? How do you notify, okay, what's worth pursuing and what's necessary to be dumped? Okay,
so you have to not only be gritty and diligent, you also have to have common sense, right? So
not that common.
So if you fell, and you fell down a mountain, then I'm not sure you should be getting back up that mountain.
Gotcha.
So the thought is that working towards your goal, you will fall. If it's a really steep fall, metaphorically speaking, then you know that's not the next get up. That's, let's start a new set of 8, 7 down, 8 up. So that's really where I feel, very importantly, that dumping it is giving up on things that aren't as important in that, because it creates headspace and you'll be much more successful getting down to what you're really going to be doing that way. If you take 6 and you make it 3, and then I'm going to challenge you again. All right, let's talk about these now. Which one doesn't make the cut? And you'll find it just takes time, like anything else. Like Warren Buffett says, like any great thing doesn't happen. You know, a waterfall doesn't just begin. It starts with one trickle. It really takes time, and it's not instant gratification, which I think a lot of is a big misnomer also because of the young billionaires now.
Overnight success stories.
Overnight success stories. Yeah. There's plenty of those, but you know that's like you have to look at that like a lotto. Mm-hmm. It's really what it is.
But not even because they're being marketed as a lotto. Because I mean, you look at Facebook. Facebook's not an overnight success. This kid worked his ass off for 3 years. You know, it's not. It's overnight, and that's not even a long time. And that is that if we're going to use that as a lotto, let that be the unicorn.
Right.
You know, but that's still not overnight.
I agree with you. I think anything successful takes time to build, and I think even Facebook today is figuring out new revenue streams and ways to build it and grow. And they buy and they merge, and the road to success is always under construction. That's another, you know, thing that's super important. Even when you're successful, it's not a mountain that you climb.
Someone's always trying to beat you out. Yeah.
You must continually question yourself, analyze what you're doing, and those are some of the things that I challenge someone who's beginning out early on to look 1 year down the road, 3 years down the road, 5 years down. So what you're building today has a very important part of what the 5-year companies looks like, as opposed to, you know, let me survive today. Because of course you have to survive today, but you have to build your organization in a way and your ideas in a way for it to be sustainable.
So let's just to bring it all home, what it sounds like you're saying, what the major takeaway is here, is that the most important thing in starting a business and in executing on a business and maintaining and sustaining a successful business is kind of always staying a little bit outside of your comfort zone. Making sure to never get comfortable and never get set in your ways. And I mean, we had the conversation about vision, we had the conversation about delegation and dumping things, and to kind of always stay maybe a little bit of outer body, you know, kind of always see where you're going, where you're headed, and who you are, and then make decisions based off of that. What are some like everyday, day-to-day practical things that we can do to make sure that we stay out of our comfort zone and we make sure we stay in that perspective as opposed to getting caught up?
I think that's a very good question. It's a loaded question also, because it really depends on what stage you're in and where you're going and what industry you're in. For example, if you're in real estate, that may not apply as much because there's tenant, landlord, banking, and finance. It's just a question of how aggressive you want to be.
They're never comfortable.
Yeah. I think in the world of consumer products, you must always be looking at what your competitors are doing, always, and like that's something that can never go away. And even if you're not looking at it, you have to put a team together that's doing it, because ultimately I'm selling in the retail space products, and there's many other competitors. So product and what and how to grow the business are always like things that I think of constantly. But more importantly is I think, what are you missing? What am I missing? What can I extend that I already have, and what extensions can we have? What add-ons can we put on the business without adding expenses? How can we maybe increase the bottom line with what we are already doing?
Right.
Maybe a new technology is coming in, maybe a better software, maybe our warehousing is out of control. There's always ways to streamline with technology, with a good mental approach to your business and understanding your customer. That's the two things that I always look at: your expenses and always look to grow revenue. Gotcha.
Yeah. So get out of your comfort zone and stay one step ahead, right?
Yes, absolutely. Get out of that comfort zone.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate that.
My pleasure, Joe.